Catholics love to talk about obedience to the church until, it challenges their politics, their comfort, their favorite intellectual cults of personality. Take the death penalty. Pope Francis has been crystal clear, and now is Pope Leo. The church vehemently rejects it. And yet scroll through Catholic blogs, YouTube comments, and Twitter threads, and you will see a flood of Catholics dissenting, doubling down, or flat out ignoring and rejecting the Pope. But why? Because instead of thinking with the church, they're outsourcing their conscience to the media, to culture war pundits, and even to celebrity philosophers, theologians, and apologists who sound more persuasive than the successor of St. Peter. In other words, Catholics are letting everyone else do their thinking for them. This isn't about just the death penalty. It is about authority, obedience, and whether we actually believe the church is who she says she is. Just days ago, during an interview, Pope Leo was asked about a U.S. senator and his political views on abortion and the death penalty. Here are his following remarks that caused an uproar in Catholic media across the board.
I'm not terribly familiar with the particular case. I think that it's very important to look at the overall work that a senator has done during, if I'm not mistaken, 40 years of service in the United States Senate. I understand the difficulty and the tensions, but I think, as I myself have spoken in the past, it's important to look at many issues that are related to what is the teaching of the church. Someone who says I'm against abortion but says I'm in favor of the death penalty is not really pro-life. So someone who says that I'm against abortion but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants who are in the United States, I don't know if that's pro-life.
First, before I discuss who exactly is promoting a spirit of disobedience and fracture by descending from the Pope, I would like to defend Pope Leo's remarks on the death penalty and abortion. So, to be pro-life is not simply anti-abortion or merely pro-birth. Just as, analogously, being pro-marriage is not merely being anti-divorce. Protecting life must not be reduced to the negative of thou shalt not kill. To promote the sacredness of human life is to acknowledge and protect the infinite dignity of every person, regardless of the circumstances, from conception until natural death. To be positively pro-life is not merely anti-this or anti-that, but to positively support and protect the inviolability of the unborn, the immigrant, the orphan, and yes, even the criminal. The unborn and the murderer, although one morally innocent and the other morally guilty, have the same ontological inviolability and dignity. The unborn and the immigrant, legal or illegal, have the same ontological inviolability and dignity. Abortion is intrinsically evil. The death penalty is not. Yet both are inadmissible because they violate the ontological dignity of the human person. Pope Leo XIV did not equate abortion with the death penalty. What he meant was that it is hypocritical and essentially dissident to claim that you're pro-life when you are merely anti-abortion or solely pro-birth while supporting and promoting the death penalty, when capital punishment, being inadmissible, is, quote, clear church teaching, end quote, as Pope Leo XIV stated. So I want to do a few things in this video. I want to demonstrate that nowhere in church teaching does it promulgate that the death penalty is, quote, intrinsically evil. Those who dissent from this teaching want to and need to make it sound as though Pope Francis taught that the death penalty was intrinsically evil, to make their argument sound more robust and substantive. Those same people aren't necessarily fighting against the teaching on the death penalty per se, but rather against papal authority. Here are 3 different clips of Catholic apologists, philosophers, and journalists who very conveniently use the word or phrase intrinsically evil or immoral when paraphrasing the teaching of the church on the death penalty.
The death penalty is always and inherently of its very nature immoral. that it's tantamount to murder, that it's no different from abortion.
The death penalty is permissible in certain situations. It's not an intrinsic evil like abortion.
The difference between inadmissible and intrinsically evil is so subtle that for faithful Catholics just trying to keep up, they might as well be the same thing.
If you go to paragraph 2267 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church and or paragraph 263 of Pope Francis's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, you will not find the phrase intrinsically evil when describing the implementation of the death penalty. What you will find is that it is an inadmissible, not intrinsically evil. Yet the opponents of Pope Francis and now Pope Leo are doubling down and regurgitating this old misrepresentation of what the church teaches regarding the death penalty being inadmissible. If you comb through all the magisterial documents, post and pre-conciliar, you will not find anything alluding to the death penalty being an intrinsic evil. I've challenged many people to find it, and the challenge still stands. The reason they do this is to not only undermine the teaching, but to undermine the magisterium itself. If Pope Francis and Pope Leo, for that matter, were to teach that the death penalty was or is intrinsically evil, then that would mean God, along with prior popes, commanded and prescribed something intrinsically evil to be carried out, or at least permitted it for the greater common good. By inferring that the magisterium is now teaching that the death penalty is an intrinsic evil, they are pitting preconciliar teachings against postconciliar teachings on capital punishment, thereby making a contradiction that isn't there and then projecting that contradiction onto Pope Francis and Pope Leo. Perhaps the loudest voice for the opposition to Pope Francis's revision to the Catechism on the death penalty is philosophy professor Dr. Ed Feser, who co-authored a book on the subject titled, "By Man Shall His Blood Be Shed, A Catholic Defense of the Death Penalty." As seen before, he was on Pints with Aquinas discussing this topic with Matt Fradd. Just days ago, Ed Feser made the following post on X, quote, "People always talk about the inadmissible part, but the real problem is with what follows. On the most natural reading, this is asserting that the death penalty is intrinsically, or of its very nature, an attack on human dignity. Such a claim cannot be reconciled with scripture, tradition, and previous papal teaching. To be sure, one can instead read the 2018 revision as asserting that the death penalty is attack on human dignity if certain conditions are not met," end quote. Notice he says, quote, "On the most natural reading, this is asserting," end quote. As shown in 3 clips, the only people that are asserting anything are those who oppose this teaching. Again, they are the ones asserting this language to undermine the magisterial authority under the guise of preconciliar popes, coupled with a literalistic interpretation of Scripture. This is really only to make their argument sound more convincing and more robust. And it really comes down to just adding or asserting the phrase intrinsically evil into the teachings. The real problem isn't the revision of the Catechism, or Pope Francis's teaching in Fratelli Tutti, or Pope Leo's off-the-cuff remarks on the death penalty. The issue is rather a spirit of Protestantism that has infiltrated the church, where Catholics are interiorly and or externally dissenting from the Pope and the ordinary universal magisterium. Ironically, they will claim that they are the ones clinging to tradition and scripture and 1,800 years of papal decrees, when they are actually only clinging to their own interpretation, setting themselves up as a pseudo-magisterium, trying to further divide the faithful. It is those who are faithful to the current Pope and ordinary universal magisterium that are properly synthesizing and harmonizing the distinctions to be made for a cohesive understanding of the inviolability and dignity of the human person and why the death penalty is inadmissible, considering we have adequate means and resources to safeguard society and the common good. The inadmissibility of the death penalty and the call for its universal abolishment is not merely an act of charity or mercy, but one of justice, in which charity vivifies justice to protect the integral dignity and development of every man, even the criminal. Pope Benedict XVI states the following in Caritas in Veritate, quote, "Charity goes beyond justice, because to love is to give, to offer what is mine to the other. But it never lacks justice, which prompts us to give the other what is his, what is due to him by reason of his being or his acting. I cannot give what is mine to the other without first giving him what pertains to him in justice. If we love others with charity, then first of all, we are just towards them," end quote. There are many intelligent philosophers, theologians, and apologists who are deceiving many and inciting them to not merely question or constructively criticize the ordinary universal magisterium, but rather to at least internally dissent. Here is how it happens. Many of these intelligent influencers will make facile and convincing arguments of stark oversimplification. For example, an innocent child of the age of reason can tell you that your fidelity belongs to the church, not to a lay philosopher or apologist. Yet how these people deceive the simple is through synthetic arguments laden with scripture verses and prior magisterial quotes, which conceal their error of the blatant one I exposed with the frequent use of, quote, "intrinsically evil," end quote. The docile child, out of obedience, will put his faith and trust in someone, namely a bishop, who knows more than the pompous lay theologian or apologist. It's the incorrigible and proud who appeal to the seemingly substantive and cohesive arguments that are subtly laden with distortions. They allow their political ideologies and novel interpretations snuff out the gifts of wisdom and counsel, becoming scandals to the weak. Code of Canon Law 752 states the following, quote, "While the assent of faith is not required, a religious submission of intellect and will is to be given to any doctrine which either the Supreme Pontiff or the College of Bishops, exercising their authentic magisterium, declare upon a matter of faith or morals," end quote. The church does not oblige you to give a religious submission of intellect and will to your favorite YouTube apologist or college professor, but to the Supreme Pontiff. It's honestly really that simple. St. Ignatius of Loyola says, quote, "To be right in everything, we ought always to hold that the white which I see is black, if the hierarchical church so decides it," end quote.